Hi guys, just thought I'd come in here and share this kind of funny story that I think will help to explain. It's a good example of something I talk about in the Emotion Free Women's Club um, about the emotional part of our brain and what it's like when we get triggered. And yesterday morning, I was, sleep deprived. I've got a 5-month-old baby. I was getting ready for the day. We were going to school, right? So I had all these things to do, and the feeling. It feels like the time is causing this kind of pressure to get it all done. And leaving the house is one of those times where I particularly always feel a little bit angsty, right? So anyway, and then it occurred to me that the cleaners were coming, right? And we've had so many dramas with cleaners. I can't tell you the amount of weird dramas we've had with cleaners. But I always need to tidy the house, right, in order for them to clean properly. Otherwise, they'll spend all their time tidying, not cleaning. So what happened at that moment was I was like, shit, I haven't got enough time to do all the things that I have to do. And I started getting into a panic state, right? Plus, Arthur starts to whinge, and then that's like an extra thing. So in this moment, it seems like all these things are causing the issue, and I don't have much access to my executive functioning, right? Which is kind of the rational side of the brain. It's the thinker, right? It's this kind of area. It's the prefrontal cortex, and what that part does is it can decide, it can discern between life and death situations. It can rationally see when something's a real problem and when it isn't, right? But when you start to get stressed, that part of your brain starts to go offline, and the primal emotional center of your brain, which is a completely different part of the brain, starts to take over. So what happened then was I went into the kitchen, and Stuart was on his way out for work. He's always stressed in the morning getting to work as well, right? So um, um, what happened was is that he was leaving the coffee pot, the butter, and all of these things out. And in that moment, my brain was like, he's the problem, right? So when your stress center is activated, um, you go into your body's trying to get you out of a situation where it feels like it's under attack, right? So you can either go into fawn, which is appease someone, to people please, to appease the attacker, to kind of submit. Or there's freeze, where you just can't function at all. And then there's me, which is attack, fighting, right? Which is not always my response, but in this situation it was. And then the other one is to run away, right? So these when this part of you gets activated, and this isn't always negative situations, right? This is emotional, when times of emotional intensity. So it can be when something really good has happened as well, right? When we're feeling a lot of heightened experience, this part of the brain is activated. So um, the job of that part of the brain is to get you out of pain and get you into pleasure, right? Is to lead you out of pain. So in that situation, it seemed like Stuart was the problem when he really wasn't the problem, but it seemed like that. And so what happened was I started angrily telling him about how unhelpful it was that all of the stuff was being left out on the counter when the cleaners were coming. And I followed him out the door with this pat of butter, and I said, so you don't want this, you're not using this anymore, right? And at that moment, and he said something, and he was just basically not engaging with me. And so he was getting into his truck, and he said, no, you can put that away, right? So then I threw it into the bush, right? Which is obviously not a rational choice. And in my head, I thought I'd got one up on him. I was like, yeah, that'll teach him, because now he won't have any butter. And so therefore he'll learn, right? So this is the kind of thing that happens when we're emotionally triggered. Now, what this is also the same part of the brain that's responsible for us picking up a drink, and or smoking a cigarette when we've decided we're not going to smoke anymore. It's basically where all willpower will go out the window when you're in this kind of state of pure trigger. And so now as I start to calm down, and as everything kind of, George goes to school, everything starts to calm down, that's when your rational brain starts to kick back in, and then it looks at you and it's like, what the hell were you doing, right? So it's like, why did you do that? Why would you throw the butter in the bush and whatever? And then so what that part of the brain thinks it's helping to do, right, is it will start to put you in shame or guilt, right? It will start to tell you off, like, well, why would you do that? That's such a stupid thing to do, blah 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 blah, because now the rational part of you is realizing how silly that is. And so if you've had a drink, or if you've picked up a cigarette, or you've done the thing you weren't supposed to do, right, it will start to tell you off. Now, that's the worst thing that we can actually do, is start to tell ourselves off, because we don't actually, there's at no point where that shame will impact that part of the brain. And what it actually does is it distracts from the learning. So what you want to try and do in these situations, rather than going into self-attack, right, or self-loathing or self-shame, is to actually, the antidote to that is curiosity. So why did that happen? What was the trigger here, right? So in this situation, it was just a multitude of things which were leading to it seeming like my stress was coming from Stuart and the butter being left out on the side, right? And how, like, what was the trigger? Well, the trigger was that. Okay, so then what happened? The behavior is that I threw the butter in the bush. Okay, it's not the end of the world, but in a situation where you're really trying to change a habit, like something like drinking or you're smoking, right? So then it's like, okay, so I did that thing. What was the result? Now, the reason we have these habits, right? So the reason I attacked in that situation is because somewhere along the line in my journey, attacking has been an effective thing to do to get me out of danger, right? So the brain is just trying to get you out of danger. It doesn't care like how it does it, right? And it doesn't have rational, it doesn't know, it just goes to its kind of goes to whatever option it has in the moment, right? So if your brain continues to think that in this situation it's going to get the desired result, then it will continue to use that habit, that fear response, okay? And so what needs to happen is you need to reteach the brain, like if you want to, you don't have to. In this situation, it's not a big deal that the butter went in the bush, right? But as a general rule of thumb, going into anger and spouting anger and being in attack mode, it's not always helpful. Although it is sometimes if you're actually being attacked, right? So what your brain needs to learn, and it won't learn through shame, it just does nothing at all. Like telling yourself you're not going to do something again and just beating yourself up, it does nothing, right? So it literally has no power at all. In fact, it perpetuates the problem because it puts you into a further stress state, right? It makes you feel even worse about yourself, which is part of the problem in the first place. So by mapping your trigger, looking at the behavior and seeing what you actually get, by actually looking, using mindfulness, by being really present and seeing what was the result, that occurred because of that? Now, was it actually effective, right? So in this situation, no, it wasn't. In fact, Stuart just found it hilarious. I found out later. But it wasn't effective, right? So the more you see that anger and rage isn't an effective tool in certain situations, if the more you see that drinking isn't an effective tool, it doesn't actually give you the pleasure you think it's giving you, or it's not getting you out of the pain in an effective way, the more you can treat this with a curious, neutral perspective rather than an opposing perspective, like a position of an opposition towards yourself, and being more gentle and curious with yourself, the more you have the capacity to actually impact and influence that emotional part of your brain. So yeah, hopefully it was kind of a little bit entertaining, and let me know if that has helped you in the comments below. Okay, speak to you later. Bye.